February 8, 1945. Serchio River Valley, Italy. Lieutenant Vernon Baker of the 92nd Infantry Division moves through German defensive positions near Viareggio. Machine gun nests cover the approaches. Concrete bunkers protect artillery observers. Enemy soldiers hold elevated terrain with clear fields of fire. Baker, leading a weapons platoon from the 371st Infantry Regiment, advances anyway. Over the next 6 hours, Baker personally destroys 3 machine gun nests, 2 observation posts, and a dugout. He eliminates multiple German positions with grenades and rifle fire. He draws fire to allow his platoon to advance. By nightfall, American forces control positions that German defenders held for months. Baker is one of approximately 15,000 black soldiers in the 92nd Infantry Division fighting in Italy. They're facing the Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS in mountain warfare, some of the hardest combat conditions in the European theater. They're winning. But the 92nd's hardest battle isn't against Germany. It's against the U.S. Army's own high command, which spends the war looking for evidence that black soldiers can't fight, and when the evidence doesn't exist, creates it anyway. The 92nd Infantry Division serves in combat for 520 days. Soldiers earn thousands of decorations for valor. The division suffers over 3,000 casualties taking fortified German positions in mountainous terrain that favors defenders. Then, Lieutenant General Edward Almond, the division's commander, writes an official report blaming the division's black soldiers for every setback while crediting white officers for every success. The report becomes Army policy, cited for decades as proof black soldiers are inferior. Vernon Baker earns the Medal of Honor for his actions in February 1945. He receives it in 1997, 52 years late, after the Army reviews its discrimination in awarding the nation's highest decoration. This is the 92nd Infantry Division, soldiers who fought 2 wars simultaneously, one against Nazi Germany and one against their own institution. If you want military history that shows what soldiers faced beyond the battlefield, subscribe right now. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. This division's combat record was deliberately buried for 50 years. The 92nd Infantry Division activates in October 1942 at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. The division inherits the Buffalo Soldiers, nickname from the 92nd Division of World War I, which earned the name from Native Americans during frontier service. The shoulder patch shows a black buffalo on a green field, a symbol of strength and the segregated status of the division. The 92nd is one of 2 black infantry divisions in World War II, the other being the 93rd. The War Department creates these divisions reluctantly, under political pressure from black leaders and civil rights organizations demanding combat roles for black soldiers beyond labor battalions. The division structure reveals the Army's segregation policy. All infantry, artillery, and support units consist of black enlisted men. Nearly all officers above company level are white. The Army's logic: black men can serve as privates and NCOs, but leadership requires white officers. This creates immediate problems. Many white officers assigned to the 92nd request transfers, viewing the assignment as career punishment. Others accept the post but bring racial prejudices that undermine unit cohesion. Some officers are competent and committed. Others are incompetent and blame their failures on their black soldiers. The division's commander is Major General Edward Almond, a Virginian who believes in black inferiority as scientific fact. His statements are documented in official correspondence. The Negro soldier has not been able to deliver as the white soldier has delivered. Under Almond's command, the division trains at Fort Huachuca for 2 years. Training is intense. Infantry tactics, weapons qualification, unit maneuvers. Soldiers work through Arizona's desert heat preparing for deployment. The division deploys to Italy in July 1944. The choice of theater is deliberate. The Army doesn't want black combat troops in France or Germany, where they might interact with white French civilians or occupy German territory. Italy is considered safer politically. The 92nd enters combat in August 1944 along the Arno River, north of Rome. Their mission? Push German forces north toward the Gothic Line, a fortified defensive position running across the Apennine Mountains. The terrain favors defense. Mountains create natural barriers. Valleys channel attacking forces into kill zones. German engineers spent months fortifying positions with concrete bunkers, machine gun nests, and artillery observation posts. Wehrmacht troops defending these positions are experienced veterans from the Eastern Front. The 92nd advances anyway. In September 1944, the division captures multiple fortified towns along the Arno. The 371st Infantry Regiment takes Pontedera after 3 days of house-to-house fighting. The 371st Regiment captures Pisa's northern suburbs, clearing German positions along the river. Casualties are significant. German defenders use the terrain expertly, falling back to prepared positions when pressed, counterattacking when opportunities arise. American advances measure in hundreds of yards, paid for in blood. The 92nd's performance in these early engagements matches other divisions fighting in Italy. Combat reports from 5th Army headquarters note the division takes objectives, holds ground, and follows orders. Nothing distinguishes the 92nd as particularly better or worse than white divisions in the theater. General Ullman sees things differently. After every engagement, Ullman's reports emphasize failures and minimize successes. When units take objectives, Ullman credits white officers. When units struggle, Ullman blames black soldiers. His reports describe black soldiers as cowardly, incompetent, and unreliable. Conclusions contradicted by unit action reports showing soldiers advancing under fire and holding positions against counterattacks. Battalion and company commanders push back. Many white officers at lower levels respect their soldiers and contest Ullman's characterizations. Their reports describe soldiers performing difficult missions under terrible conditions. Ullman ignores these reports. He has a narrative to support. Black soldiers cannot fight as effectively as white soldiers. Every combat action becomes evidence for this predetermined conclusion. In February 1945, the 92nd participates in Operation Fourth Term, the Allied offensive to break through the Gothic Line. The Gothic Line represents Germany's last major defensive position in Italy. Stretching 200 miles across the Apennines, the line consists of fortified positions built into mountain terrain. Machine gun positions cover valley approaches. Artillery observers on peaks direct fire onto any movement. Concrete bunkers protect defenders from artillery bombardment. The 92nd's objective? Break through German positions in the Serchio River Valley and advance toward La Spezia on the Ligurian coast. This is the action where Lieutenant Vernon Baker earns the Medal of Honor. On April 5, 1945, Baker leads his weapons platoon against German positions near Castle Aginolfi. The castle sits on high ground, offering commanding views of surrounding terrain. German defenders use it as an observation post and command center. Baker's orders: eliminate German positions preventing American advance toward the castle. He moves forward with his platoon through pre-dawn darkness. German sentries detect movement and open fire. Baker returns fire, killing the sentries with rifle shots. He approaches the first machine gun nest and eliminates it with hand grenades. German defenders respond with heavy fire. Baker's platoon takes casualties. Rather than pull back, Baker continues forward, systematically destroying defensive positions. He eliminates 2 more machine gun nests, destroys an observation post, and clears a communications trench. His actions allow his company to advance to the castle's base. The position, held by Germans for months, falls to American forces by afternoon. Baker's platoon sergeant later describes the action. Lieutenant Baker destroyed those positions alone. He'd order us to cover him, then move forward under fire. I saw him take out 5 German positions in 6 hours. Never seen anything like it. Baker receives the Distinguished Service Cross immediately, the Army's second highest decoration. The Medal of Honor recommendation is submitted but disappears in the review process. Baker won't receive the Medal of Honor until 1997, after a comprehensive review identifies racial discrimination in the awards process. This is the story of soldiers who proved themselves in combat. then watch their institution deny what they accomplished. If you want military history that exposes how institutional racism shaped the historical record, subscribe right now. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. The Army buried this division's achievements for decades. Throughout April 1945, the 92nd continues offensive operations. The 371st Regiment captures Massa after intense street fighting. The 371st takes Carrara, pushing German defenders north. The 473rd Infantry Regiment, attached to the 92nd, advances through mountain passes, clearing fortified positions along ridge lines. The division advances 40 miles in 3 weeks. Significant progress in mountain terrain against prepared defenses. German units withdraw under pressure, abandoning positions they held for months. By April 25th, the 92nd reaches the Po River Valley. German resistance collapses. On May 2, 1945, German forces in Italy surrender. The war in Italy ends. The 92nd's combat record shows 520 days in combat, 3,000 plus casualties, 12,000 plus German prisoners, captured 65 towns, liberated thousands of individual decorations for valor. 5th Army Headquarters commends the division for achieving objectives and maintaining pressure on German forces during the final offensive. General Almond writes a different assessment. In June 1945, with the war in Europe over, General Almond submits his official assessment of the 92nd Infantry Division's performance. The report is titled Operations of the 92nd Infantry Division and runs 47 pages. It becomes one of the most controversial documents in U.S. military history, not for what it reveals about combat, but for what it reveals about institutional racism disguised as professional assessment. Almond's conclusions. The Negro soldier in the 92nd Infantry Division was inferior in combat to white soldiers. Lack of intelligence, initiative, and courage resulted in consistent failures to achieve objectives. White officers repeatedly demonstrated leadership and bravery that black soldiers could not match. Almond supports these conclusions with selective evidence. He cites specific engagements where units failed to achieve objectives, attributing failures exclusively to black soldiers' deficiencies. He ignores contexts, German strength, terrain advantages, artillery support failures that explain tactical setbacks in any division. When units succeed, Almond credits white officers. When units fail, Almond blames black soldiers. The pattern is consistent throughout the report. Battalion commanders who served under Almond file rebuttals. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ray, commanding the 3rd Battalion, 371st Regiment, writes, "My soldiers performed every mission assigned. They advanced under fire, held positions against counterattacks, and achieved objectives. Failures occurred when support was lacking or when orders were unrealistic. Problems of command, not soldier quality." The Army War College accepts Almond's report as authoritative. It becomes required reading for officer candidates studying infantry operations. For decades, military education teaches that the 92nd Infantry Division's problems prove black soldiers are inferior in combat. The report influences Army policy on integration. When President Truman issues Executive Order 9981 desegregating the armed forces in 1948, military leaders cite the Almond Report as evidence integration will harm combat effectiveness. They argue the 92nd's experience proves segregation protects unit cohesion and performance. What the Almond Report omits is as significant as what it includes. The report doesn't mention that the 92nd faced the same German forces that other divisions fought. Veteran Wehrmacht troops defending prepared positions in terrain favoring defense. It doesn't mention that casualty rates in the 92nd matched other divisions in the Italian theater, suggesting similar intensity of combat and soldier commitment. It doesn't mention that German intelligence assessments of American forces made no distinction between the 92nd and white divisions. German reports describe American forces generically, noting tactical strengths and weaknesses without racial commentary. It doesn't mention that thousands of individual decorations for valor were awarded to black soldiers in the 92nd, including Silver Stars, Bronze Stars, and Distinguished Service Crosses. Most significantly, it doesn't acknowledge that General Almond himself bears responsibility for any tactical failures. As division commander, Almond planned operations, allocated resources, and made tactical decisions. If the division underperformed, command failures share responsibility. But the Almond report places blame exclusively on black soldiers and praises white officers, including Almond himself. The report's impact extends beyond the 92nd Division. It influences military racial policy for 20 years, delaying integration efforts and reinforcing stereotypes about black soldiers' capabilities. Historians examining the 92nd Infantry Division's combat record reached different conclusions than General Almond. The division served in difficult conditions. The Italian campaign from 1943 to 1945 was characterized by slow, grinding advances against German forces defending mountainous terrain. Every division in Italy, British, American, Canadian, Brazilian, South African, faced similar challenges. Combat reports from 5th Army headquarters show the 92nd performed comparably to other divisions. The division achieved assigned objectives, suffered casualties consistent with combat intensity, and maintained unit cohesion under fire. Specific achievements the Almond report minimized or ignored. Vernon Baker's actions near Castle Aginolfi represent extraordinary individual valor. His systematic destruction of German defensive positions under fire demonstrates tactical skill and personal courage at the highest level. The Army recognized this 52 years late. The 371st Infantry Regiment's capture of Massa required 3 days of house-to-house fighting against German paratroopers. Combat reports describe intense close-quarters combat, with American soldiers clearing fortified buildings room by room. The regiment took the town and held it against counterattacks. The 371st Regiment's advance through the Serchio Valley required crossing open ground under observed German artillery fire. Soldiers crossed despite casualties, established positions on the far bank, and repelled German counterattacks. Multiple Silver Stars were awarded for actions during this operation. The 473rd Infantry Regiment, attached to the 92nd, captured over 3,000 German prisoners during the final offensive. These weren't surrendering garrison troops. Many were combat soldiers from frontline units choosing to surrender to American forces rather than continue fighting. Company and battalion after-action reports consistently describe soldiers advancing under fire, holding positions against counterattacks, and achieving tactical objectives. These reports contradict Almond's characterization of soldiers lacking courage or initiative. German documents captured after the war provide objective assessment. Wehrmacht intelligence reports describe American forces in Italy without distinguishing between divisions by race. German tactical assessments note American advantages in artillery, air support, and logistics. Standard observations about American forces generally. If the 92nd were as incompetent as Almond claimed, German intelligence would have noted it as a tactical advantage. They didn't. The most damning evidence against Almond's conclusions comes from comparing the 92nd to other divisions in Italy. Casualty rates. The 92nd suffered approximately 3,000 casualties over 520 combat days, a rate of 5.8 casualties per day. Other divisions in Italy averaged between 4.5 and 7.2 casualties per day, depending on when and where they fought. The 92nd's rate falls within normal range. Advancement rates. The 92nd advanced approximately 100 miles from the Arno River to the Po Valley over 9 months of combat. Other divisions in Italy averaged 80 to 120 miles over similar periods. The 92nd's advancement matches theater norms. Prisoners captured. The 92nd captured over 12,000 German prisoners. Per capita, this exceeds several white divisions in Italy. Capturing prisoners requires aggressive action. Surrounding enemy positions, cutting off retreat routes, forcing surrenders. Incompetent or cowardly troops don't capture thousands of enemy soldiers. These statistics suggest the 92nd performed at or near average for divisions in the Italian theater. Average performance is respectable. The Italian campaign was brutal, and every division struggled. But Ullman's report insisted the 92nd underperformed dramatically. The statistical evidence doesn't support this conclusion. The 92nd Infantry Division returns to the United States in November 1945. Soldiers who fought German forces in Italy for 520 days come home to segregated buses, restricted access to VA hospitals, and GI Bill benefits that many can't use because white colleges won't admit them. Vernon Baker returns to Wyoming. He applies for jobs and is told, "We don't hire colored." He uses GI Bill benefits to attend college but faces discrimination from faculty and students. He eventually joins the Airborne Rangers and serves in the Korean War, retiring as a captain in 1968. Many soldiers from the 92nd struggle with the contrast between their service and their treatment at home. They liberated Italian towns from Nazi occupation, earned decorations for valor, and captured thousands of enemy soldiers. Then they came home to a country that wouldn't let them eat at lunch counters. The institutional impact of the Ullman Report persists. Through the 1950s and 1960s, the report is cited in military education as case study in why segregation was necessary. Officers learn that the 92nd's failures prove racial integration harms military effectiveness. President Truman's Executive Order 9981 in 1948 begins desegregation, but implementation is slow. The Army resists, citing the Ullman Report as evidence. Only during the Korean War, when manpower needs force integration, does the Army fully desegregate combat units. In 1996, the Army conducts a comprehensive review of World War II Medal of Honor awards to identify racial discrimination in the awards process. The review examines cases where black soldiers received the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest decoration, for actions that would have earned white soldiers the Medal of Honor. The review identifies 7 cases, including Vernon Baker. On January 13, 1997, President Bill Clinton awards the Medal of Honor to Baker and 6 others, all posthumous except Baker. Baker is 77 years old, 52 years after his actions at Castle Aginolfi. At the ceremony, Baker says, "The only thing I wanted was to be treated as an equal. I went to war to defend freedom. I came home to find I didn't have it." The 92nd Infantry Division was inactivated in 1945, reactivated for training purposes at Fort McClellan in the 1950s, and deactivated again. The division exists today as a training division at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. In 2021, the Army War College removes the Ullman Report from required reading lists. A statement explains, "Recent scholarship demonstrates the report reflected commander bias rather than objective assessment." The 92nd Infantry Division's combat record, when examined without prejudicial lens, shows performance consistent with divisions serving in similar conditions. This acknowledgement comes 76 years after the report was written. The soldiers of the 92nd Infantry Division fought 2 wars, one against Nazi Germany in Italian mountains, and one against institutional racism in their own army. They won the first war. The second war took decades longer.